Hello, shamans and charlatans. My name is TBSkine, and the Udyr visual update is apparently well underway in production at Riot. We won't see it for a while yet, but they have shared some updates on what they would like him to be, what they would like to turn our big Flash Bear Slap Man into. And so I thought we should take a look at it and say some things about it, have some opinions and stuff. That's what we do on this channel, isn't it? Yes, indeed it is. But the place to start, probably, is with a little bit of a recap of Udyr and his story and what he's all about. Unfortunately, it is relatively simple with Udyr because he has not been a very popular subject of League of Legends lore for quite a long time. So, Udyr is a shaman or a spirit walker of the Freljord, and what that means is that he's a person who can commune with the animals and spirits of the Freljord itself. The problem is, he's a really strong one, and that seems like it should be a good thing, but unfortunately, where most shamans and spirit walkers walk by a horse, and they'll be here like the horse going, "Oh, I sure would like some grass right now," which is fine, Udyr can sit inside of his house and listen to squirrels having arguments over nuts like 15 miles away. He hears so many voices, so many thoughts, so many feelings. He's so in touch with nature and so unable to filter out any of it that it becomes quite overwhelming. And in the Freljord, there's a special hazard to that, because while spirit walkers can draw power from the spirits of the Freljord and sort of like make themselves like draw on the power of the elk or whatever, they can also be influenced in the other direction. Entities like, for example, the Volibear are able to essentially fully mind control and physically mutate spirit walkers into some quite terrifying things. So being a really powerful spirit walker is a perk that comes with some downsides. Another downside is that Lissandra hates shamans. She hates spirit walkers. She hates all remnants of the old faiths that existed in the Freljord before the rise of the cult of the Three Sisters, of which she is the sole survivor, of course. And so, on one fateful day, the Frostguard raids Udyr's village. And he is still a young man at this point, like he's not really able to defend himself very much, but seeing like everyone he knows and loves being slaughtered around him, it has like a negative impact on the poor kid, and so he unleashes, without really meaning to, a massive explosive cry of psychic energy that brings down the side of a mountain, basically, on top of the village, crushing the Frostguard, but also completely wiping out his village. He barely manages to survive that and staggers off into the Freljord with no clan, no family, no tribe, nobody to protect him. He becomes a wanderer. At some point during his wandering, he meets Sejuani's biological mother, and they strike up a bit of a relationship, and it seems to be there's a lot of mutual attraction there. And we don't know much about how that relationship progresses, but we do know that Udyr is fairly invested in it, to the point where he is an oath-sworn father of Sejuani. Like, Sejuani, it's not really clear that she knows this, but Udyr considers himself her father. Not necessarily biologically, but in the Freljord, fatherhood is not determined by biology. It is determined about, like, whether or not you have sworn to be a person's parent. So far so good. Then, at some point, while Udyr is carving out like a meager existence for himself in the Freljord, trying to stave off the voices that are always invading his head, Lee Sin comes along. Now, Lee Sin is on a penance journey of his own, because he has, well, a problem that's not dissimilar to Udyr's. Lee Sin is possessed by the spirit of the dragon, which gives him tremendous amounts of power, which he has a lot of trouble using correctly. And so one of the reasons why he's traveling to the Freljord is he's on this journey of penance to try and learn to control the dragon, and also in shame for some of the failures he had in terms of controlling the dragon spirit. He meets Udyr at some point and sort of senses that, hey, here's a kindred spirit, here's someone who might be able to understand what I'm going through. But Udyr is like, yeah, no, everyone here wants to kill me, fuck you. And they get into a fist fight where basically, they just fight, and Lee Sin, because he knows all the fancy martial arts and stuff, manages to dodge Udyr long enough for the both of them to get completely exhausted, and then they can actually talk to each other. And they strike up something of a friendship, and eventually Lee Sin offers to take Udyr back to Ionia with him, where Udyr can learn from the spiritual masters of that land how better to control, all of the everything that's going on inside him. On the journey back to Ionia, and while they're there, they participate in some battles and stuff. Like, a whole bunch of stuff happens. Not really very important, but eventually Udyr, having spent a lot of time learning how to master himself, how to manage the voices that are constantly clamoring for his attention, how to manage his powers, feels the call of the Freljord. Like, he feels that it is time to return home, and so he does. And when he does, he finds that his daughter, Sejuani, is in control of the Winter's Claw, and worse than that, she's considering allying with the Volibear. Now, Udyr knows full well how powerful the command of the Volibear is, and I say the Volibear because that's what people in the Freljord call him. And so he's like, oh, well, that seems like a bad idea. I should probably join the Winter's Claw and maybe keep an eye on this stuff. And it's a good thing he did, because if he hadn't been there, Volibear would have compelled Sejuani to sign the entire Winter's Claw over to Volibear to be used as sacrifices or vessels or like whatever the hell Volibear wants to use them for. Because Udyr is there and because he is capable now of resisting even something as powerful as the call of the Volibear, he's able to prevent that from happening and keep Sejuani safe and counsel her carefully on how to avoid being dragged into, you know, the power games of the gods of the Freljord. And that's pretty much where we left off with him, was him essentially squaring off with Volibear and being like, you come after my daughter, I'll fucking take you, buddy. What exactly happened in that duel, we don't get to know yet. But so far, so good on Udyr's story, and it seems that the place that his story is going is that his narrative is going to be very much about, first of all, how well he can actually control his powers, because even though he has learned to master his powers and he's not, like, going to be instantly mind-controlled by Volibear, he still needs to, like, drive a sliver of silver into the palm of his hand and draw blood sometimes in order to shut the voices out. He's able to control himself, but it is kind of tenuous and precarious, and there's a dangerous element in what would happen if someone as powerful as Udyr got taken over by, say, Volibear, or indeed by any of the other spirits of the Freljord. What would happen if he lost control? That seems to be the peril that Udyr's story places him in. In terms of where he's going, in terms of a narrative, it seems that the connection with Sejuani is the main thing that's going to be driving him, because Sejuani's mother is dead at this point, but Udyr is sworn to Sejuani as a father. Like, he considers himself her dad, but she doesn't necessarily know that, and so there's this dynamic going on there of Udyr trying to be a father to Sejuani when Sejuani is, first of all, not very interested in having a parent, because, well, she has some trauma with parents, quite a lot of it, in fact. And also, she doesn't know that he's her dad. And, like, there's a good character dynamic there that I think would be very interesting, especially in terms of Sejuani being the leader of the Winter's Claw, and Udyr trying to do, like, dad stuff for her in terms of teaching her how to command people, how to organize things, like, doing fatherly guidance on top of that. So how does any of this tie into his current character design? Well, it doesn't, because his current character design is bad. It's not only because the model is ancient and clunky as hell with some terrible, terrible character animation compared to, like, the standard where League of Legends is at nowadays, but also because his model, like, he wears, like, a bearskin on his head, and he's wearing, like, a gi that looks like a Heihachi gi, like, it looks like something, like, straight out of Ionia, which sort of makes sense in that he's someone who has been to Ionia and learned a bunch of stuff, but he's in the Freljord, he's part of the Winter's Claw. Why he's wearing that thing, who knows? And he's got these wooden clogs on, which again are sort of meant to tie him to the idea of being sort of this shaman-monk kind of combination that was his original concept, but which just doesn't, like, it doesn't work with his story, it doesn't work with his lore, it doesn't work with anything that he is nowadays. Like, there's a reason why people have considered Spirit Guard Udyr the unofficial visual update for Udyr for many, many years, because it's just the one that actually, like, seems to somewhat frickin' fit who this character is supposed to be currently in the lore. So, from my perspective, what Udyr would need for a visual update is, first of all, to be tied into the aesthetic of the Winter's Claw, of which he is a part. Like, he should have some bits that remind, like, that makes him look like he's a Winter's Claw person of some sort. Legends of Runeterra has established an aesthetic for the Winter's Claw that's very heavy on leather, heavy on, like, furs, heavy on like, thin fabrics, and that it sort of has a slightly shabby quality to it a lot of the time. So some of that would need to be in there. There should also be some visual indicators of his struggle with control. One thing I've seen suggested is that he should have prayer beads, like, that he's gotten from Ionia, that, like, he can grasp and hold on to and, like, do mantras and like, meditate in order to control his powers. That might be an interesting way to go with it. I would also just like to see, in terms of his visual design, some indications of wildness, that this is a man who has spent the vast majority of his life living in the wilds, And, like, maybe not the best personal hygiene in the world, and now that he's part of the Winter's Claw, it's not like they're gonna make him take a bath ever, because that's not really their style. Some wildness, some feral nature, because he is, like, this animal-influenced person who's constantly kind of struggling not to go feral, constantly struggling not to go animalistic, and some kind of indication. Like, I would like some part of his character design to have dad qualities, and in terms of a character design, in terms of a character body type that's really not very well represented in League of Legends, give him a bit of a dad bod. And I don't mean like that he shouldn't be like buff or whatever, because yeah, sure, he's a warrior, although I would argue that Udyr kind of doesn't need to be buff. Like, he kind of doesn't need to, because he draws his power from the spirits. Like, that's the whole thing, is like that he's not like, it's not that he's, like, good at punching people personally, it's that he draws power from the spirit realm that gives him the ability to do things far beyond what his actual physique should make him capable of. So, like, I feel like Dad Bod is kind of the way to go there, because he is, like, one of the few father characters that we have in League of Legends. We don't have a lot of dads running on. Actually, now that I think about it, I can't think of, off the top of my head, I can't think of another champion who's a dad. No. Like, I can think of some daddies, because, like, oh my god, like, League of Legends has some of those, but no actual dads. So I'd like that to be a strong part of his character design. That's not something he was ever originally designed to convey, so, like, no wonder it's not there. But that's something I certainly would like his rework to include. And fortunately, that kind of does seem to be the direction that Riot is leaning. Mostly, the direction of this rework is pretty conservative. They don't seem to be especially interested in changing too much about Udyr. They talk a lot in this post about, like, preserving his identity and preserving everything that people like about him, not making radical changes. It's not going to be a Galio situation where the old character is basically going to vanish and a new character is going to be made from the same concept. We want to preserve as much as possible. And some of the early explorations that they shared was this series of what I think is, frankly, a series of pretty brilliant exploration sketches. Now, sketches like these, you shouldn't put too much stock into them, because they're not like the earliest of early sketches that are produced in the cycle of, like, creating a character design like this, but this is pretty early in the exploration of what the character is or could be. And that's why you see that there's a lot of variety between them. Like this one with the giant mohawk and the huge prayer beads, like, kind of strung across his chest. This one with some antlers sat atop of him, sort of to indicate his connection with the animal world, which is a cool idea. Something I quite approve of. All of them with tattoos. That seems to be the one sort of through line that just follows every single one of them. Some with a hood, sometimes, like, with spiky hair, sometimes more focused on the big beard. Riot said that they focused in on the Mountain Brawler and the Shaman as their two sort of main places to go, and that makes a certain degree of sense, because that seems to be what's a little bit closer to what Udyr originally, not so much what he originally is, but what he's supposed to be. Like, the Untamed down here, like, those clogs, like, I get that they're part of his original character design, but he's not in Ionia, he's in the Freljord. He's walking around on mountains in the ice and snow. He needs boots. He doesn't need clogs. Which brought them on to some explorations around the animal, sort of spiritual, like, how do we visually indicate that Udyr is channeling power from the spirits whose abilities he's borrowing? And there's a few different ideas going on here, which they've called different things. Like Mimic, for example, which seems to be that Udyr literally manifests, like, actual, like, spiritual arms that do the thing for him. Like, he'll roar like the bear or whatever, and then there'll be bear hands floating in the air. Then the sculptural totem claws, which I don't like so much because it makes Udyr dependent on items. It makes him dependent on some kind of focus or thing, rather than having his power innately emerge from him, which is where I'm more towards, like, something like, maybe not so much the Animal King, because I don't really know what the concept with the Animal King seems to be that he just, like, literally physically transforms, which I don't like, because that's not really how the Shaman Spirit Walker thing works. If you're being transformed by the spirits whose power you're borrowing, something has gone terribly wrong. Like, that's what happens to Volibear's followers, is they get transformed in terrible ways, so I wouldn't like that necessarily as a direction for Udyr, which ends up getting us to the Spirit Arms or Animal Pattern War Paint, which has two, like, good things. Like, first of all, that anything that's to do with tattoos, anything that's to do with body painting, anything that's to do with symbology being painted on the body, there you can do some storytelling, some aesthetic storytelling, especially about the culture of the place that the character is coming from. What kinds of tattoos do they make? These things can have tremendous, like, cultural influence and value. So that from a visual perspective, that's cool. Secondarily, having the tattoos sort of express the power that's within is like a solid way. Like Avatar: The Last Airbender did this with Aang, where every time he enters the Avatar state, his tattoos start glowing. Hey, that's a pretty cool idea. You might as well copy something like that, that when he's using his spiritual power, the tattoo that's associated with whatever animal he's calling upon will glow in response to his spiritual power being channeled, or whatever. So here, I'm leaning more towards the spirit arms, animal pattern, war paint kind of concept, but as a character design, absent the sculptural totem claws. Like, yeah, here we have the dad bod. Like, here we have, like, the sort of Ursine, hirsute, rather, Ursine. Hirsute body type, like, sort of very big, thick, big midriff, lots of core muscle, lots of power there. But without being sort of ostentatiously bodybuilder-ish, and without being quite as lean, as certainly the Animal King is, which is much more of a sort of an MMA-style body type rather than like Mountain Man, which I prefer. And also here, like, he's got like the big beard and like the sort of hastily assembled ponytail, which I quite like as, again, as a thing with Udyr, where it's like, he's probably not exactly Mr. Personal Hygiene, he's probably not exactly Mr. Personal Grooming. He's like, fucking hair, it just grows and then it gets torn out sometimes when I run through brambles or whatever. Fuck it, who cares? Put it up in a ponytail, don't worry about it, don't think about it. Like, I like that. The thing I'm missing from all of these is some visual references to Ionia, some visual references to his time there, to the things that he learned, to the things that he took home with him. Like, because he is a mix of two traditions. He's a mix of the Freljord tradition, but also he has learned so many things from Ionia that are so important to him that it should be more present in his character design. And here, it just sort of kind of is like the rope belt, maybe, kind of, sort of, but none of these really have Ionia as a visible, distinct presence to me, and that's something that they seem to be working on as we head on down to some of the more final explorations of what the character is going to look like. So, for example, here we see they have settled on what seems to be a consistent body type. They have settled on the dad bod, which I'm quite pleased with, because that's the one I would rather prefer that they settle on, because that's one body type that's just not that well represented in League of Legends. I do wish that they would make him less like, look how sculpted he is here. Like, look how, like, the straight, hard edges and lines around his muscles, like rock hard kind of physique. And I would like his physique to be a little softer. Like, a little bit, not that there shouldn't be muscle, just that it shouldn't be, like, chiseled. He shouldn't be like a rock face that someone could climb on. He should be more like a big bear. Like, well, maybe not a bear, because that's the volibear thing, and he hates the volibear, but, like, more, like, soft around the edges, but with a very hard and strong core, is the kind of vibe that I'd like to have for him. And here, the thing that they've settled on as the Ionian feature for the character is a ring of prayer beads around his neck. And that's a pretty solid design feature in terms of being, like, an iconic thing, very visible, certainly when you're looking at him from above, very visible when you're looking at him sort of as a general character design. Like, that stands out. It's very obvious that that's there, but I'm still missing something that's more, something that feels more personal and less decorative. Because, like, these prayer beads around the neck, they feel decorative. Like, this feels like costuming. And what I'm looking for is some part of Udyr that's like, oh, he has a little trinket or a little thing. Like, a little thing that sort of belongs to him and has some meaning to him, but it's not presented. Like, it's not up front and like, oh, yes, here's my giant prayer beads that I have around my neck. But like a little ring of prayer beads that he maybe has around his wrist or something, like, or a little wind chime or something that he took home from Ionia that has like a personal significance to him. I would also like, again, because Lee Sin is like his best friend, I wouldn't mind if he had one of Lee Sin's red ribbons, for example, like one of the red ribbons or bandanas that Lee Sin likes to tie around his eyes. If Udyr just had one of those, like attached to a belt or something, just as a reminder that, hey, Lee Sin is my buddy, like, he's important to my story, and maybe someday Lee Sin could visit the Freljord again when Ionia is not being invaded by Noxus, and they could hang out and, like, be dads together. I don't know, Lee Sin, does he have dad energy? He sort of does. Like, he sort of vaguely does have dad energy, but not Not that much. He could do with some dad energy. Like, I kind of like the idea of Lee Sin as, like, this sort of patient master to young apprentices. Having dad energy with all of them, like, making silly jokes at them, like, then occasionally turning around and kicking a tree in half. Anyway, that's Lee Sin. We're not talking about him. We're talking about Udyr. So I like the dad bod. I wish it was less chiseled. I hope they don't go with, like, that very sharp edged thing. I hope they go for something that's more soft, because again, also because it's supposed to be fatherly, right? Like, he's supposed to be someone where, like, maybe you look at him at first and you go, oh, well, he's clearly no threat, and then, like, you look at a second time and it's like, oh no, wait, actually he looks like he could bench press a mountain. But it's not like in your face the same way that these, like, really hard chiseled muscles are. That's kind of what I'm looking for. Another thing they seem to have settled on is they definitely want some kind of antler thing going on top here. Like, they want some kind of thing, and that's for silhouette design. Like, without some strong silhouette design somewhere on his body, he would just be a dude running around without, like, he needs some kind of strong silhouette design to make him recognizable in the game. There's some game design requirements for that. And in terms of visual storytelling, again, also, like, yeah, when you think of what does a shaman from the high north look like, you would think of, like, they would use animal bones, they would use antlers, they would use, like, trinkets or things that are associated with the animals that they pray to, or that, like, that they call upon for strength. Would be the idea. Like, that's the legendary stories about the berserkers, by the way. For example, the skinwalkers of my culture, is that they would wear beast hides into battle and thus take on the power of the animals that they were channeling. Like, that's a very old part of, like, Scandinavian shamanic tradition, is this idea of, like, taking on the attributes of an animal by wearing parts of it on your body. So, like, that works well enough. It gives him a strong silhouette. I feel like maybe it's a little ostentatious for Udyr. Like, I feel like Udyr is, like, a guy who doesn't necessarily want to draw a lot of attention to himself. Like, he doesn't necessarily want to be the center of attention ever, because he's not really a show-off in any way, and he's not really, like, a public-facing frontline leader character either. Like, he's not the guy who walks out in front and gives the inspiring speech. Sejuani does that, but he's the guy who talks to Sejuani before she gives the speech and reassures her and says, hey, we're all with you, you can do this. Like, who gives her the dad talk before she goes and does the cool leadership. So, like, I have mixed feelings. Like, I feel like Udyr should not be ostentatious. I feel like he shouldn't be showy. And there's really no way to wear antlers on your head like that isn't kind of showy. But on the other hand, it also makes sense from every other possible perspective. So I would like the antlers to be a thing that, like, he puts them on to go into battle. But, like, when he's at home, when he's, like, just hanging out, like, he's not wearing that nonsense because he doesn't need it. I would also like him to wear some more clothes. Because Udyr, as far as we know, is not an Iceborn. First of all, which means he doesn't have the resistance to cold that Iceborn have in the Freljord. And second of all, even if he was an Iceborn, why would he run around without a shirt on? You can make the argument maybe that in order to channel the power of the whatever, like the tattoos that he's got on his body, he needs to not have it covered up. Like, sure, but again, then I would like the thing to be that, like, when he spawns into the match for the first time, he, like, throws off this coat of furs that he's been wearing and goes, okay, battle time, I'm gonna go shirtless for this and rely on spirit power to keep me warm or whatever. But that, like, again, like the antlers, under normal circumstances, like, he'll be wearing a shirt because he's not an idiot, he's a dad, and he'll be telling Sejuani, he's like, oh, are you wearing enough clothes? You need to bundle up more, it's cold out there. Like, I want more of that practical, sensible vibe from him, rather than the extravagant, rather than the extraordinary, like which is the same thing, like, with the skulls and the things hanging off him. Like, yeah, for a battle costume, fine, but for Udyr as a person, like, the story, the vibe I get from him, especially his relationship with Sejuani, especially the way that he's interacting with the rest of the tribe, like, mostly sort of focused on keeping his family safe, and he's not really invested in Sejuani's mission of, like, oh, the Winter's Claw must be the strongest clan in all the land. He doesn't have dreams of conquest like she does. He wants to keep her safe, and he wants, like, to like, help her be the best that she can be because he is her oath-sworn father. So again, I would like him to not be too out there and ostentatious in his look, because again, that's not really the vibe I get from where he's supposed to go. So here's some more explorations of hairstyles and antler styles for Udyr, and there's been some discourse around these. Like, some people thought that he was being depicted with dreadlocks, which he is not, as far as I can tell. Like, I'm not an expert on the subject, but, like, there is some there's some cultural complexity when it comes to dreadlocks. Like, they're specifically associated with certain cultures, and especially certain colonized cultures. So, like, having white dudes running around in dreadlocks is like, it causes some eye rolling at best, and this is the best not to do it. But I don't think that's what it is. I think his hair is just matted. Like, this is hair that just hasn't been washed or combed for like 20 years. Like, that's the vibe I get from the hairstyles that are on display here. And as for what kind of hairstyle I like, this is cool. Like, I think it's cool if he's like has like a shaved part of his head is shaved, and like you can see tattoos underneath. That's cool. But that doesn't feel like Udyr. Again, he doesn't feel like Mr. Personal Hygiene to me. He doesn't feel like someone who bothers styling his hair. He feels to me much more like someone who's like, throw it up in a ponytail if it gets in his eyes. So like these two down here, to me, feel more along those lines. Like, this would be him when he's not bothering with a ponytail, and then like when he goes into battle, oh yeah, ponytail up, and like get a thing going there. Similar with a beard, like the braid feels too much like personal grooming. Like, that feels too much like caring about his own appearance, which again, that's not the vibe I get from Udyr. Like, the vibe I get from Udyr is that he's gonna, like, if Sejuani rides out one day and looks really fucking good in her armor, he's gonna, like, elbow the guy next to him and be like, hey, that's my daughter. Yeah, look how cool she is. Like, he's gonna be that kind of guy, bragging about how good his daughter looks, like how cool she is and how strong she's, like, well, she's a great leader and whatever, but not the guy who especially feels himself in terms of fashion or in terms of styling himself. Like, I kind of like this as a vibe, because it's like, it's just a ponytail, I just throw it up there, get the hair out of my face, I don't care. Sort of practical-minded, but not especially stylish. This seems to be a more final render of where they want Udyr to go, and one decision that they've made, which I kind of like, actually, is they've taken the prayer beads from around the neck, where, especially if they're going with that hair, as you can see here, he gets really, really top-heavy with detail, right? Like, if you have the antlers and the hairstyle, like, all over the place with wild hair and wild beard, and you have the prayer beads, you get this big lump on top of the character design, right? Like, just this big lump of stuff, and then absolutely fuck all else, like, on the rest of his body, basically. Like, he's just not a lot of important detail anywhere else in the body. And that's that kind of clustering that you might want to avoid, because when you cluster a whole bunch of details together, they sort of become one detail, rather than being 5 details, and like each individual one can sometimes have a lot less impact. Whereas, if you let the upper body be free here, and like, so, wild hair and antlers, cool, and then further on down, aha, there's the prayer beads, there's the Ionia connection. To me, that works better, like, in terms of how you want to space out those details, but I'm still looking for, and also I like that, like, this is much more practical, like, none of the skulls, none of the sort of ostentatious nonsense of him sort of putting on emblems and being fancier than he really is. Just like a pair of pants and like some heavy knee pads and like sandals, because he's an idiot. Like, he's been in Ionia for too long. Maybe that could be the thing. Like, he insists on wearing sandals. I feel like he should wear socks. I feel like he should wear socks with the sandals. Again, dad energy. Give him that dad energy. That little silly detail that makes the rest of him that much more intimidating when he's coming for you with all the force of a charging ram. Like, socks with sandals, right? Come on, give him socks and sandals. I'm still looking for, like, again, the big giant prayer bead. Like, as a visual detail in League of Legends in-game, yes, that would be the way to do it, because you're looking for these character models from a million miles away. Usually, you're looking at them from above and from a good distance zoomed out. But I really want something small, like a necklace or like a little thing, just a little thing that's like from Ionia and that's his. That's not on display. That's not part of the costume. That's just a thing for him, like as a storytelling element. Because again, I feel like Udyr's appreciation for Ionia, like his gratitude towards the monks there and the people who taught him and helped him, and towards Lee Sin for that matter, I feel like that will be a quiet and personal thing for him. I don't think he would be that out there about it. Like, he wouldn't be sitting around telling stories about that time he went to Ionia and saw a something spirit or whatever, trained in a monastery or something. He would be someone who has like a thing, like a little locket or a thing, and like when he thinks no one's looking, he's going to sit there and sort of play with it with his hands, and someone's going to look over and he's going to realize he's being looked at and put it away, like a little embarrassed, like, oh no, that's nothing, don't worry about it. Like, that to me feels more like the Udyr character that they're setting up. So I'm still looking for that, like that little thing that's just for him. That's not for us. That's not for anyone else. That's just for him. Which is not important to his character model in League of Legends, like, in the game, but it would be something I'd consider important to his character design as a whole. Yeah, the tattoos. So they've gotten rid of the bear, which used to be one of his primary spirits, because, again, Volibear, if you call on the spirit of the bear in the Freljord, you get the Volibear, and, like, you don't necessarily get him back out of your head afterwards. So, yeah, he wouldn't call on the bear, but he would call on the ram. And the tiger? Wolf? It's not... I think it's supposed to be like a saber-toothed tiger, this one. And then there's the spirit of the hawk or the phoenix. I would have to imagine this would be tied to Anivia. This would be tied to Ornn. This would be tied to the iron boar. And I think that would be the turtle stance, the defensive one. Which is one of the siblings of Anivia, Ornn, and Volibear, whomst we have not yet met. We've also not met this one. I thought the seal sister might be there. Like, that would be his healing thing. Like, if he had, like, a self-healing or lifesteal or whatever stance. I don't know how much they're going to change his gameplay. I figured the seal sister would be there, but no, we get this is lion, whatever it is, which I don't remember that we've heard of, but then I don't necessarily remember all of the deep lore about the Freljord off the top of my head. But yeah, the Udyr rework as a whole is shaping up pretty well. This rendering right here, you can see they've sort of taken the idea that, okay, when he manifests his power, and here she seems to be manifesting the Volibear, by the way, I don't know why. That's the weird the thing that's been weirding me out about this illustration is that, like, that's Bear Claws and Lightning Powers, so that's... He's calling on Volibear here, clearly. Like, why is he doing that? And we should probably not read anything into that. I think it's just like a concept sketch of, like, what would it look like if he called on Volibear? But the idea of his spiritual power manifestation seems to be coming from... like, the idea of him as, like, he borrows the power from these spirits, and then it manifests as, like, a shield, or, like, this ethereal power that surrounds him, and then he can use that to attack with. And that's a little interesting, because in Legends of Runeterra, we have seen, like, specifically spirit walkers and shamans who transform, like, who actually pull that power into them. Although they have, I think they've all been, yeah, they've all been Ursine, like, they've all been Volibear's people, so yeah. Maybe only Volibear's people transform. Like, that could be a good way to like, chart the difference. Like, that seems to be one of the ways that the game, or the lore, sort of keeps tally of the difference between, here's what you do if you're a good spirit walker and you have things under control, and you're not being used as a horrifying mutant, like, cannon fodder in a war perpetrated by an ancient, angry, survivalist god. Well, then you call on a spirit's power and nothing happens to your own physical body. It's all external to you. It's all outside of you, controlled. Whereas if you call on spirit's power and it takes you over, then it transforms you. Seems to be what they're driving at, and I quite like that as an idea. But if this is the direction that they want to go with Udyr, first of all, give him more body hair. Like, really, seriously, you clean shaved him for this illustration? No. Give him the body hair. He needs it. Again, he's a dad. He's an older man. He's a dad, and he's supposed to have that sort of fuzzy, like, Northman, big, gruff, hairy dad energy. Like, give him the body hair. First of all, again, also, because no one in League of Legends has fucking body hair. Like, no one does. Braum is clean shaven. Set, who's, like, literally an animal man, is clean shaven all across the chest. They need to deal with some fucking body hair up in here. Like, get some diversity going. Like, I hope this is more representational of where they're going than the other sketch down here, because this one also kind of cuts him a little bit more. Like, again, it goes for those sharp, hard lines on his muscles that make him look really, like, cut and buff, in a way that's like, no, don't, not cut and buff, make him look big and beefy. There's a difference. Like, no bodybuilding, just muscle, just like a power lifter body type. Like, that's where I feel Udyr should be going. Anyway, that was a lot of blabber about Udyr, and if you have enjoyed listening to a lot of blabber about Udyr and where his rework may or may not be going, or should go, in my opinion, anyway, then like, comment, subscribe buttons down below. Click on them, and also the bell icon, but just click buttons and engage with the video, and YouTube goes, hey, he engaged with the video, and then you get to see more of my videos, if that's a thing you want. And also, my videos get shown to more people, and that helps me pay my rent every once in a while, which is nice. If you'd like to help me pay my rent more directly, then I have a Patreon, a merchandise store, and a tip jar. You can use them if you want to. The Patreon has some rewards on it, whatever. But if you don't feel like you want to do that, for any reason whatsoever, You don't have to. And if you feel like you're not in a position that you're able to do that because like money is scarce and the world is going to hell in a handbasket, don't worry about it. It is more than enough that you have watched the video. Outside of that, I have a second channel where I post Let's Plays of video games and stuff. I've been playing a bit of Legends of Runeterra over there. There's some Hollow Knight still going on, some Mass Effect 2 happening, and I'll probably start a new game over there soon. So if you want to see that, like, comment, subscribe over there. And I have a Shorts channel where I put up short 1-minute League of Legends characters on hot takes every single day, pretty much. So if you want that, this is over there, subscribe. Oh, okay. I think that was all of it. Thank you very much for watching. Wear a mask, wash your hands, take the vaccine when it comes. I'm getting mine tomorrow as I record this. And act with solidarity towards those who are worse off than yourself.